Hi, I'm Becky Nunn, and we're filming here at Nunn Design in our office here in Port Townsend, Washington. And in this episode, I'm going to be showing you how you can use prong setting rings, cabochons, and chip beads with epoxy clay to make fabulous projects. To make the prong setting ring, you're going to need to have some cabochons, and it doesn't matter if the cabochons fit perfectly inside of the prong setting ring, and we'll show how you can adjust to make just about any size cabochon work that's in that general size. You're going to need to have 2 equal size balls of the epoxy clay, and I've already pre-mixed mine. So you'll want to follow the manufacturer's instructions and blend thoroughly. You'll also want to have a pair of needle nose pliers and a prong setting ring. The prong setting rings are so great because you can stack them and you can use different size stones. And even if the stone doesn't fit perfectly within that prong setting ring, you can use a wee bit of the epoxy clay underneath to fill that gap and to have it adhere fully. The first step is you're going to want to bring your prong settings farther back using your needle nose pliers. Just bend them back slightly and kind of just move them out of the way so that when you're working with your stone and your epoxy clay, you can fully get inside of there. Also, I like to have some handy wipes or wet wipes right beside me. I usually hold them right in my lap so that they're easy to grab and then I can constantly be wiping the epoxy clay off of my fingers. Go ahead and pinch off a small size ball and place it inside of your prong setting. And then you might want to try the different various stones that you have to see how they all fit. And I already knew that this one was a really good fit. You saw I had 3 before, and this was a really good fit. It's not perfect and it doesn't need to be. Slightly press down the cabochon into the epoxy clay until it's fully adhered down into the prong setting ring. If you had a lot of excess showing, you could use, and I don't, but you could use some more epoxy clay and go around the outside edge, and that's what you saw that I did in some of the samples here. You can see that I have a little bit more of a gap, and so I put a little bit more of the epoxy clay, and in this case I was using a brown color. But this stone had a lot of highlights of black, so I chose the black epoxy clay. Now my stone is in place, and to bend back down the prong settings, slightly bend the prong setting in, and then using the flat part of my needle nose pliers here and here, not the tips, I'm using that to squish down that prong setting. And it might take a little bit of practice to make sure that you have it in position and then you slightly bend down. Then I turn it to the other side and I press down. Double check that you didn't cattywomp, which is what I just did when I pressed that down. And then on the opposite side, you press down your prong setting. There. Now I'm going to go back and do this diagonal. Squish down. Not too much with that point, but more of that flat. Did you see when I tried to use that point, how I kind of jumped off? You want to make sure that you try to use the flat of your needle nose right here. It works a little bit better. Get it started by moving it in and then pressing it down. And then you can double check that your stone is in position and then go back and press again if you need to. But how simple and how sweet is that? Here's some examples of other fun things that you can do with the prong setting rings. In this example, I used chip beads. Same process, bent back the prong settings, embedded some epoxy clay into the base, and then embedded the little chip beads. This is an example of using the same cabochons but it was a much bigger space, so I embedded 3 of the cabochons within the epoxy clay. And here's an example of where I used the epoxy clay in the base. I put a small little brass embellishment. I cut an arrow, and then once that had dried and cured, I poured a 2-part epoxy clear over the top, and then bent the prong settings back over the epoxy and the resin mix. This is Becky Nunn with Artbeads, showing how you can make fun prong setting rings with cabochons.